There is no red, white, or blue in this country. The only color that matters is green, because we live in the United Corporations of America. Greetings, salutations, Status Coup, live in the United Corporations of America. I think Lockheed Martin or one of those dirty bastard defense contractors is on the flag behind me. But they're popping champagne because don't let Trump or his media sycophants fool you. This is a war, and I do not think it's just going to stop with a small little retaliation from Iran. Joining me, the wonderful Zaina Day, journalist, contributor here at Status Coup, half Iranian. So I'm very pleased that we're able to get your perspective. I know you have loved ones there. So this is personal to you. We were live yesterday, so we went through a lot of the breaking news over the weekend where our dear leader Trump, according to all reports, seemingly based on vibes he got from Fox News. No, that's not an Onion headline. Vibes he got from Fox News, we'll get to that, decided to attack Iran. Then his parade of idiots went on the Sunday morning shows, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, basically saying, nope, this is a one-off. We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with their nuclear program, which by all accounts, they don't actually have one, which we'll get to that too. And no, this isn't regime change. And then Trump contradicted them with his own tweet or truth, basically saying, yeah, regime change will be good. And more insane tweets and truths today, including preemptively, I think, blaming others for oil and the price of gas. Predictably is about to shoot up in America. Sorry to tell you. And since Republicans love to blame Democrats when it happened, let's blame Trump when it happens here, because I'm already seeing gas going up near me, and I'm sure it's going to go up, particularly when we're dealing with the Strait of Hormuz. Is that how I pronounce it?
Strait of Hormuz, yeah.
So we'll get to all that. Smash the like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Obviously, Status Coup, people know us for our coverage of stories that the mainstream media ignore here in America, but this is going to affect all the things we cover here in America, including the economy, the working class, the already horrible economic Hunger Games, because what's ever left of the working class and the middle class in America, they're the first ones to take it on the chin when we start these illegal wars. So let's start with the latest. Colin, if you have any of the video of Iran retaliating, which you would expect them to retaliate. They were firing missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar. First, I'd like to know, why do we have a
And this is Al Udeid, which is the largest military base in the Middle East. And just to note, the Iranian military warned Qatar before the missiles were sent.
Yeah, so
claiming it was supposedly supposed to be a deterrent to help
yes.
to call for de-escalation, essentially.
So of all the parties here, the big bad Iranians, as the media and political class here like to frame, they're the ones acting semi-responsibly, if you ask me, because this could have been a lot worse. They essentially, gave well advanced notice to Qatar and then therefore the U.S. military base that they were going to retaliate. This is from the New York Times. It's the tweet I sent you, Colin. Iran coordinated the attacks on the American airbase in Qatar with Qatari officials and gave advance notice that attacks were coming. to minimize casualties, according to 3 Iranian officials familiar with the plans. The official said Iran symbolically needed to strike back at the U.S., but at the time carry it out in a way that allows all sides an exit ramp. They described it as similar to 2020 when Iran gave Iraq a heads up before firing ballistic missiles at an American base in Iraq following the assassination of its top generals. So I think that's kind of important because, Zaina, obviously the Iranian regime, I'm not here to stump for them. They're oppressive towards women. They've done some horrific things. With that said, there's a lot of bad regimes around the world, and we can't go bombing all of them, and we can't go starting wars with every bad regime around the world. We seem to only do it in places where there's a lot of natural resources we want to steal and control we want. But for all the cartoonish framing of Iran as, this nuclear monster, and they're going to wipe Israel off the map, and then they're going to come after America, it seems to me, in the case of Soleimani, where Trump assassinated their top commander in 2020, that could have started a war. They responded pretty responsibly. And now, in this case, not that this will be the only response, but it wasn't really, it's not a surprise attack. They gave Qatar and then by extension America a heads up that this was happening. So it seems to me all the caricatures that and the bullshit intelligence that preceded Trump's attack over the weekend, they're showing by their actions they don't seem to have a suicide wish to nuke America.
Yeah, I mean, that logic is ignorant to begin with, right? They're going to develop, and according to the IAEA report that was released, it was 60%, potentially 60% enrichment, and developers had said that would be like covering a bomb on like 2 tankers that wouldn't even be able to reach Qatar. So this idea that they would just self-destruct and just send off one warhead, and then what happens after that? They get annihilated after sending that warhead. The logic for this is asinine. It's under this assumption that I do not support the current regime, but it's under this assumption that the current regime is kamikaze. Right. That they're just going to destroy their entire country and their own people if they get one nuclear bomb. And I will say another thing that's extremely important to mention is that Israel itself has not had an inspection in decades. They do not disclose what armament they have in the way of nuclear weapons. They will not admit to having them. They will not deny, though international bodies estimated anywhere between 60 and 90 warheads that they currently have. So there's also, a deep, deep hypocrisy there.
Right. And also, we have a clip from Breaking Points that we're going to show in a minute. They interviewed an expert on this. If you are actually trying to deter Iran from, this phrase enriched uranium has been thrown around, you could enrich uranium without trying to create a nuclear bomb. There's other reasons to enrich uranium, and countries do it all the time. But if you were trying to deter them from doing it, which I don't actually think this is why Trump did this, this has had the opposite effect. Because why don't we fuck with North Korea? Because they have a nuke. Why don't we fuck with Russia to a certain extent? Because they have a nuke. So Iran's calculus might now be changing. Last 5 years, they assassinated our commander. They're working with Israel now to attack us, and they're now directly attacking us. So maybe we need to actually go all the way because diplomacy is not working. And even when we do engage in diplomacy, credit to Obama, I'll say, not many things to credit him for, but at least under his administration, they struck a deal with Iran. From all accounts, Iran was honoring it. According to Tulsi Gabbard, who, let's be clear, whatever, I was hoodwinked by the whole Tulsi Gabbard shtick. I'll take the L on that because she told the truth in front of Congress in March that they don't have a nuclear program, and she moonwalked back now because Trump basically publicly embarrassed her, saying, I don't care what she thinks. Now
She
she's
pulled a
towing.
Colin Powell. Remember,
Yeah,
Colin Powell was like,
she,
Iraq doesn't have weapons of mass destruction. And then, 3 weeks later, he's like, oh, wait a minute, let me go before Congress and claim that they do.
yeah. So Tulsi, her whole war, the consequences of war, and we need to do everything we can to stop these regime change wars, gone with the dustbin of history. She will forever be a fraud because she is choosing her own political ambition and perseverance rather than whatever bullshit pretense she claimed was the reason she got into politics. But putting that aside, to me, if I was Iran, I would go full steam ahead now, trying to get a nuke to stop Israel and America from clearly trying to overthrow the Ayatollah. He's old, so whoever then would replace him, they want to install their own puppet. America wants to install their own puppet. And if your goal was to stop them from advancing to a nuclear weapon, which by all evidence, non-fantasy land corporate media, I'm talking in reality, all evidence is they weren't doing that. Well, now I think it gives them reason to do that. Your thoughts before we move on?
I'll just say that I agree with everything you've just said. I will just say that Reza Pahlavi has been making his rounds for the last year and a half. This has been escalating from the rhetoric, and we'll get into that a little bit more later, but rhetoric against Iran from both parties. Hell, Chuck Schumer was out. We covered it, 3 weeks ago, Jordan, where Chuck Schumer was saber rattling. I know you and I were on a live covering that just a couple weeks ago. And they have been interviewing Reza Pahlavi. The Shah was extremely corrupt, set by the United States government, stole a tremendous amount from the Iranian people, and then the U.S. government played both sides in helping to seat the mullahs in Iran, the current regime. And Iran's been wholly secular for the most part. So there's a mythology that, they're Islamic extremist nation as the population, and that's just not even close to factual. They're an advanced country. They're advanced academically. They're advanced scientifically. Like their women get educations, their women are scientists, physicists, what have you. So we're going up against something different, a country with 90 million people who are technologically advanced, even despite the sanctions that we've put on them. And I think that we treat this as almost, the way that the people are described and Iranians are described is not accurate to the reality on the ground there.
It's the same thing with Russia, right? I mean, Putin, I think, is a thug, and I think he is an autocrat. But the people of Russia, I mean, you can't paint a broad brush. And we've been doing that in this country dating back to the Red Scare of the 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm watching a documentary on the Vietnam War now on Netflix. I recommend it to folks if you have Netflix, called Turning Point Vietnam. I mean, really, very little has changed from the 1960s to 2025. Find a boogeyman. In that case, it was Russia. The commies, if we don't stop them in Vietnam, they're going to go further west. And before you know it, they'll be in our classrooms and take over everything. In this case, it's Iran. They're
sleeper cell Russians in the United States. That was a whole thing. Remember the Red Scare, the movie Red Dawn and everything, right. All that propaganda.
And in the case, in the Vietnam era, you had cops cracking skulls of protesters, infamously the 1968 Democratic National Convention, protest on college campuses, Kent State. And now you got cops shooting at protesters, during ICE raids and Black Lives Matter protests and the genocide protests. So unfortunately, very little has changed. And if you're a boomer watching, you know what I'm talking about because you were probably there back in the 60s and you're seeing a lot of the same things play out. But I want to show this clip from Breaking Points. I think it's instructive because this is actually someone explaining in specifics why it's bullshit that Iran was, within, you hear a week, a couple of days. Benjamin Netanyahu's been saying, for the last 30 years, Iran is within 5 minutes of a nuclear bomb. We played that clip yesterday. We'll play it again later. But I want to show this clip. They interviewed an expert explaining this whole 60% enrichment number that they throw out, it doesn't mean what they're trying to scare you into thinking it means. Let's play that clip.
They are more likely to break out toward a nuclear weapon now, which is what those of us on the anti-war side have been saying for 20 years here. What Iran has is a latent nuclear deterrent. They mastered the fuel cycle back in 2005. That is, they proved that they knew how to enrich uranium to whatever percent. Now they need 3.6% for their electricity program, and they need a little bit of 20% for their medical isotope reactors. But otherwise, the war party has a kernel of truth when they say, and you know how they do it, they always make it a rhetorical question. Well, what do they need with all that 60% enriched uranium? Well, there's a real answer to that other than they're on their way to making nuclear weapons. Of course, they could have enriched up to 90+% all along. They enriched up to 60% as a bargaining chip to negotiate away in order to try to get the sanctions lifted and try to get the United States back in the deal. It's the same thing they did in the Obama years. And of course, it was in response to Israeli assassinations of their nuclear scientists and attacks on their personnel in Syria and things that caused them to go ahead after Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018 and go ahead and start enriching up to 20 again, and then eventually up to 60%. Now, you'll hear every hawk on every show say, oh my God, 60% uranium. And then what they're betting on is that the audience doesn't know anything about it. And what you're telling them is nuclear, scary, be afraid, and we stop the thing. Trump was asked, but Tulsi Gabbard says they weren't breaking out toward a nuclear weapon. And he said, well, I don't care what she said. They were getting close to one or something. He said, Kooky Tucker Carlson needs to understand that Iran can't have a bomb. So what's implied there heavily, of course, is that Iran was making a bomb and that we stopped them from making a bomb. But that's just not true at all. And, you know, I'm not trying to be, convince anyone that to be naive. As I said, it already was a latent nuclear weapons deterrent in a sense. But what it also is their civilian energy program. And, you know, any economist could explain why it might make sense for Iran to burn their domestic supply of uranium and sell their oil on the world market if they can. And so this is, you know, the main part of it. On the other hand, it also is just like Brazil and Germany and Japan, where they've proven they've mastered the fuel cycle and they could make atomic bombs if pushed to it. So it's sort of like saying, I have a revolver in one pocket and some bullets in the other. Let's you and me not get into a fist fight. And then that way this thing won't escalate. That's essentially been their stance our whole 21st century long.
Yeah, that's accurate. And there's one thing that he didn't mention there, and that is the authorized use of military force still being abused even to this point, even to this day. And we have called on Status Coup, and we have covered protest against the AUMF now for 7 years? Anti-war protest against the AUMF, Thomas Massey's whole wartime Iran wartime, I said Iran, that's funny. Iran Wartime Powers Act is an effort to pull back the claws of the AUMF. And this time the AUMF was used to literally basically start what is essentially World War III. So the authorized use of, for those that don't know, it started after 9/11. It was an initiative in order to give.
Your dog is pissed too.
I know. They're doing construction next door, so they've been like crazy the last 2 days because they're building a foundation, and they have like crazy noises out there, and they're like, oh God, the world. And I'm like, yes, that's how we feel too, but for completely different reasons.
Well, I'll also point out, because too many things that are not normal have been normalized in this country. The Constitution, which I actually think should be rewritten and update in a lot of ways, because we're literally allowing mass carnages around this country, i.e. the Second Amendment, which has been grossly bastardized to allow children and everyone to be mowed down all over the country. But that's a different story. But to these strict constitutionalists, you know, Ted Cruz likes to walk around with his little pocket-sized constitution, and all these Republicans and MAGA who, you know, pretend that they sleep with the Constitution. They don't seem to give a shit about the Constitution when it has to do with their dear leader abusing it, because there is no justification. Pete Hegseth, we played the clip yesterday, was asked, when did you inform Congress of this? He said, well, according to the War Powers Act, we told them when our jets cleared airspace. No, that's not how it works. You don't inform them after you illegally did the thing.
We post hoc informed them. Yeah, no.
Right. And by the way, the Democratic Party, we're going to get to their unsurprising, horrible response to this. Their main thing is not opposition to this illegal war, this unnecessary war. It's that you didn't give us the permission to launch the illegal war. That's the, few exceptions.
Right.
Bernie, Senator Chris Murphy, pleasant surprise, spoke out strongly against it. But for the most part, Democratic Party is either being silent on this or, supporting Trump. So
only
I also
47 have signed on to Massey's bill.
Right.
So.
By the way, I put in a request earlier for an interview with Republican Thomas Massey. Brave stance. He's the only Republican that has stood out against this. Trump is now literally launching a PAC to primary Massey. Massey's probably going to lose.
Good luck.
He'll probably go the way of Liz Cheney but I don't know. You would know better than me. Maybe
no,
in Kentucky.
He's loved in Kentucky. He's loved. Kentucky is a purple state. It's highly independent. It's very libertarian leaning. A lot of kind of left leaning views. Thomas Massey is loved in the state and revered. So good luck.
Oh, good. Good to know. I probably don't agree with him in 90% of things, but I agree with him and give credit where credit is due. So I want to point out also, here is why. Not that Congress can solely be dependent to do the right thing because they helped us get into Iraq. But here is why you don't give a mad king full authority, a mad Republican king or a mad Democratic king. This New York Times story, again, so much of Trump's insanity has been normalized that we're kind of at that numbness state that when we hear shocking things that for any other politician might be disqualifying, might get them impeached, might get, investigations. With Trump, it's just like, oh, more insanity. I want you to listen to, it seems, the basis for Trump actually launching this strike. Not because of nuclear weapons, not because of the threat of nuclear weapons, not even, it seems, because of a regime change. It seems Trump did this because he had kind of like some FOMO, fear of missing out, based on Fox News fawning over Israel's strike on Iran. New York Times, if you have this, Colin. Mr. Trump had spent the early months of his administration warning Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel against a strike on Iran. So, seems like his head was in the right space before he did this. But by the morning of Friday, June 13th, hours after the first Israeli strikes, Trump had changed his tune. He marveled to advisors about what he said was a brilliant Israeli military operation, which involved a series of precision strikes that killed key figures in Iran's military leadership and blasted away strategic weapons sites. Trump took calls on his cell phone from reporters and began hailing the operation as, quote, excellent and very successful, and hinting that he had much more to do with it than people realized. Of course, he didn't. Netanyahu went around him because Israel knows America is essentially going to be its bitch no matter what, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president. Later that day, Trump asked an ally how the Israeli strikes were, quote, playing. Let that sink in, meaning playing optically on TV. He said that, quote, everyone was telling him he needed to get more involved, including potentially dropping 30,000 pound GBU-57 bombs on Fordo, the Iranian uranium enrichment facility buried underneath the south of Tehran. The next day, the president told another advisor he was leaning towards using those bunker buster bombs on Fordo while taking pride in both the bomb's destructive power and the fact that the U.S. is the only country that has the bomb in its arsenal. The advisor left the conversation convinced Trump had already decided to bomb Iran's nuclear sites. At the same time, the president's team was closely monitoring how their most prominent supporters were reacting on social media and TV to the prospect of the U.S. joining the war in a more visible way. They paid close attention to Tucker Carlson, the influential podcaster and former Fox host, who was vehemently opposed to the U.S. joining Israel and taking on Iran. So vehemently opposed, as soon as Trump called him out by name, Tucker ran with his tail between his legs and basically, according to Trump, called Trump to apologize. That's not I'm not reading for the New York Times, I'm telling you. Anyway, Trump became infuriated by some of Carlson's commentary and started complaining about him publicly and privately. Political advisors to Trump had been swapping notes on various public and private polls examining the popularity of military action against Iran, noting that American support for operation depended on how pollsters asked the question. Now to the good part, or scary part. The president was closely monitoring Fox News, which was airing wall-to-wall praise of Israel's military operation and featuring guests urging Trump to get more involved. Several Trump advisors lamented the fact that Carlson was no longer on Fox, which meant that Trump was not hearing much of the other side of the debate. Got that?
That's ridiculous. He's playing this like it's The Frickin' Apprentice, while we're sitting here terrified of, American men and women being sent overseas and what it's going to do to our oil prices and how it's going to destabilize our economy and everything that it means to get in another war. And Trump's worried about his freaking how it's polling and what it looks like because it was cool that, Israel sent over some boom booms to, terrorize Tehran.
I mean, that's literally what we're talking about. And say what you want. I don't want to do a false equivalency because I actually don't think Kamala Harris would have done this. But say what you want. Democrats might have no conviction, but they're not exactly like launching wars based on MSNBC's coverage. That I could say.
True.
They are mostly, you worked in Democratic politics for a bit. They're mostly contorting themselves, listening to pollsters, doing focus groups, and having overpaid idiot loser consultants tell them what to do. But they're not doing
about their donors.
Right. They're not doing it based on, hey, damn, Hannity's really into this Israeli strike. Hey, damn, Mark Levin is really revved up. Look at these beautiful bombs. And like
it's idiocracy. It's I mean, I can't even believe that we're getting this news as to what military what's coming up and where the White House is from memes and from Truth Social.
And by the way, part of why, and you also have to put this on the Democratic Party because they lost to this idiot 2 times. Could have lost the 3rd time. We've gone through how 2020 was a lot closer than people think. Biden did win, but not by a lot. But he doesn't know anything. He actually, by all reporting, thought, yeah, I could just make this a one-off again, like Soleimani, where I'll just go in and, kill the top Iranian commander, and there won't be much blowback. Well, you've kind of upped the ante because Israel, we're paying for most of Israel's bombs. Most of the military's defense budget comes from us. So we are in it with Israel from the beginning. It wasn't just Israel going in to attack Iran. It's America because we basically are their top benefactor. So do we actually think, I'm not a foreign policy expert. I don't pretend to be one. Does anybody actually think that this is going to stop with Iran doing a, kind of minor retaliation against the U.S. base in Qatar? You don't think they're going to wage economic warfare, which could be closing down the Straits of they don't have complete control to close down the Straits of Hormuz, but they can cause a little chaos there, which would affect global trade, would affect oil prices.
Already are. It's already causing this instability is already causing chaos in the Strait of Hormuz. There were multiple reports from Reuters, Associated Press, that tankers and massive tankers are already turning around, doing U-turns, trying to look for longer routes, which is going to, of course, drive up cost. And they're going to try to come in the back way, but in the back way is where Gaza is and where that instability is going on. The other side is right there where Israel and Gaza is. So, in a way, this is a proxy war of trade routes as much as it is about BRICS, as much as it is about Israel expansionism. Yeah.
And by the way, this is another New York Times story. They don't even know where most of this uranium is. We've already gotten into the part of there's no actual evidence that Iran was enriching enough uranium to create a bomb, according to Tulsi Gabbard's. Oh, first let's show Tulsi Gabbard as a reminder. This is what Tulsi Gabbard, when she had a moment of accidental truth, said. I think it was back in March. Let's play that clip, Colin.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
You hear that? 2003. And I'm not saying just trust Tulsi Gabbard and never just trust what the U.S. intelligence agencies say. We know about Iraq, Vietnam, many other lies that were fed to us to launch us into a war. But, I mean, she doesn't really have a reason to lie. And Obama, to his credit, by all reports, Iran was honoring that agreement because they were trying to get rid of crippling sanctions that was affecting their economy. So,
and I would say what she said before Trump attacked is far more accurate, likely, than post the attack.
Right. And let's just point out here for a second, I don't want to get into a side distraction, because obviously the most important thing is this could turn into a full-fledged war. I do not think it would be beyond Trump to send ground troops into the Middle East for the only purpose of wagging the dog. We've talked about it, Zaina. I don't think he's joking about wanting to serve a third term. And what better way to illegally disregard the Constitution and say, well, this is an extraordinary situation. We have a war and I need to stay in office, and have his little ducks in the Republican Party go along with it, and his Supreme Court, which seems to reinvent the law, go along with it. So let's not, but to be clear, this is why it's so important to follow news outlets, preferably independent outlets, that are consistent. And I'm not going to name names, but I think people could connect dots, because there were leftists who suddenly started turning to the right in recent years, saying,
who could that be?
Saying ridiculous things like Trump is more anti-war than the Democrats. No, none of them are anti-war. And it was very evident that he was never anti-war based on his record. First of all, he lied when he was a candidate. He was not against the Iraq War. He was for the Iraq War. He then turned against it when it was clear to most people it was a fucking mess. But originally, he was cheering for the Iraq War. The media let him get away with that, like they let him get away with most of his lies. But this is a man, in his first term, he armed Ukraine. People conveniently forget that. He bombed Syria illegally. He tried to do an illegal coup on Venezuela. He nearly started a war with Iran by illegally assassinating their commander. The military,
embassy in Jerusalem, which caused, a tremendous amount of upheaval in the Middle East.
The Pentagon budget went up every year in his first term, and now it is going up to nearly $1 trillion. Mr. Anti-War Trump. I mean, we could go down. There were reports that in his final few months, the sane people around him had to stop him from bombing Mexico Crazy. To get rid of the cartels. I mean, all of this information was readily available, but there is financial incentive for leftists, air quotes on the leftists, to do the pivot to the right, what they call the Dave Rubin, because there's a big audience. There's a big audience there, and they're not going to check you on the facts. Okay, so this is why it is important to follow people. Obviously, people can evolve, whether it's a YouTube.
You're
host,
not about to do your "Why I Left the Left" video, Jordan.
I should have done that a long time ago. I'd work a lot less and I'd make a lot more money. No. And by the way, if you want to know what my shirt says, corporations do not care about you or your communities.
Nice.
I wish I could sell it, but I got it in Portland. Anyway, so he was never anti-war. Just like these people saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is out-lefting the left on war. They forgot to tell you that literally the day before Russia invaded Ukraine, she bought a shit ton of Lockheed Martin stock. anti-war, Marjorie Taylor Greene. The problem is, why can't people just say they're all corrupt? They're all war pigs, the Republicans and the Democrats. We got to stop with this for-profit lie machine, which has become a lot of YouTube, that, hey, it's really clicky and there's profit in just attacking the Democrats 24/7 and totally disregarding the Republican fascism, because there's a huge audience for that. And on the other side, I mean, there's big YouTube channels now. Midas Touch is one of them. They're blowing up that they're just anti-Trump headquarters, but they mostly ignore Democratic Party corruption. There's not a lot of money in taking off both hats and saying, no, they're all fucking corrupt. But you sleep a lot better if you tell the truth. So I just want to say that as a side. Trump was never anti-war. Trump was never anti-war. None of these Republicans are anti-war. By the way, well, not some of them are, few. And by the way, none of them were ever anti-censorship. That was another thing. All these leftists, oh, the Republicans are the anti-censorship party. Oh, yeah? The Republicans trying to create laws to allow people to run over protesters who protest oil pipelines? That's free of censorship. The Republicans literally creating bills in Texas to create a vigilante system so that anybody could go try to hunt down people aiding in abortions. The Republicans that want to basically make being transgender illegal. The Republicans banning books. Yeah, they're so anti-censorship. Anyway, sorry to get into a side.
Well, no, I was just going to say really quick, a Pew Institute study came out, or a Pew Institute survey came out yesterday showing that 60% of Americans polled, both sides of the aisle, do not want this war. They do not want this war. The majority also wants us to stop funding Israel's war machine. So, the aid funding, they're a little bit washy on, but when it comes to actual military aid, the majority of Americans want this stopped. Second to that, 20% had kind of no opinion. So if this goes deeper, that 20% is going to have an opinion. And which way do you think the majority of those are going to sway? So it could be anywhere close to 80% of the country is going to be against this onslaught. So none of our politicians and even these media channels are not where the general public is. And the general public is, I'm sick and tired of this two-party system that is screwing us over and doing the labor of the military industrial complex while they make the fat cats rich and the rest of us are sent off to, and then our children are sent off to fight in these proxy wars.
And can I tell you something, Zaina? And Colin, I'm telling you now, I'm going to go to the economic tweets that are in the middle of the live doc. There has been a nuke dropped on the United States, and it's deadly. It's just not from Iran. It's from your own government, sponsored by the corporations. The real nuke that has been dropped on America happened 40 years ago, okay? And it's called neoliberalism. Look at the numbers that are coming out. U.S. homelessness hit record high in 2024. Homelessness in America hit record high in 2024. It increased by 18%. You don't hear the generals on CNN talking about that, do you? You don't hear the New York Times doing, oh my God, homelessness is up by nearly 20%. This is all a distraction to cover up from the real nuke on America. Hey, did you know a new poll recently, the bottom 60%, 60% of U.S. households don't make enough money to afford a minimal quality of life. And I would say that's an undercount. What does that mean? Well over half of the country is fucking poor and struggling and living paycheck to paycheck and don't have, some studies have ranged from $400 in the bank for an emergency to $1,000. That's the nuke we should be talking about, not the fake bullshit from Iran. But this is what they do to distract. The politicians distract, whether it's Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. I'm not saying we shouldn't have responded to 9/11, but with a 20-year war that became a giant fucking boondoggle, according to the Washington Post, a great in-depth report, the generals were being told on the ground, spend $300 million a day in Afghanistan. On what? Doesn't matter. Spend $300 million a day.
$300 million a day. Every single one of these bases are privatized. There are the Vanguard Group, Core Civic, the same groups that run our detention centers for migrants in our prison system. A lot of the same groups have portfolios along with the military industrial complex, and they pay for everything from soldiers' uniforms to what they eat, to the cleaning, to the tents, to the buildings on site. These 800 military bases are a massive sink of federal dollars. It is a whole ass industry. Our military bases aren't ran and supported by U.S. military personnel overall. It's privatized corporations. So we pay that extra fee to these private corporations, this inflated fee for every piece of gear and every building that's built on these sites, and even for renting the site locations themselves for security of our soldiers that are on the base, which is crazy when you think about it. We pay these private contractors for security of our military on these military bases, and it has been trillions of dollars, which is absolutely insane when you think about that whole privatized machinery. It's far beyond just the tankers that are built and the planes that are built.
And
it's a whole last industry.
Quick public service announcement, and then we'll get back to this serious topic. Welcome new Status Coup member, Elizabeth. Elizabeth joins 20 new members we got yesterday, because I was live with Tina yesterday for our Status Coup Sunday live stream. So we're really trying to grow Status Coup. We're kind of knocking. We're starting to knock towards 500,000 YouTube subscribers. We're at 458,000, I believe. And I think if we keep this momentum, we could get there fairly quickly. But as important as the numbers are on the YouTube end for subscribers, it is equally, if not more important, that we keep growing our paid membership. And I'll tell you, if you're new here, because we have a lot of new subscribers, as humbly as I could say it, but proudly, we are the leading independent, capital I, independent outlet that leaves the studio and is on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. We will be on the ground covering Iran war protests. We have been coast to coast covering the Trump Gestapo that he's been sending, these ICE thugs. We covered the protests in LA. Tina has done coverage on the ground that she should get multiple awards. And she got shot, by the way, by these less lethal bullets, which are not less lethal.
She's done amazing work. Some of the best footage coming out of LA has come from Tina Desiree Berg and
you're paying for that. You're paying for Tina. You paid for her cameraman. We got Ashley and John have been doing great reporting on the ground, covering the ICE raid protests in New York City. They were just down covering the protests in DC on No Kings Day, even though No Kings, which is kind of, in my view, a little bit of a neoliberal, vote blue no matter who group, but whatever. They said, we don't want to have a protest in DC. We want to have it anywhere else. We said, fuck that. We're going to DC, where the North Korea-esque parade's going to be. And John and Ashley were on the ground there. And I just talked to Ashley today. Obviously, we're not going on the ground in Iran or Israel. That's not really our beat. But we are planning our next on-the-ground reporting trip. We're either going to go to Memphis. If you didn't know, Elon Musk is poisoning a community to build a AI supercomputer factory, and it's literally poisoning the community. People are sick. That's happening in Memphis. And we're also going to try to fold into that trip another one of our kind of on-the-ground economic trips to speak with the people on the ground who are being laid off, who are working multiple jobs, who are facing eviction, who are getting laid off because of artificial intelligence, to speak to people who have been affected by the Doge cuts, by the Trump cuts. So we are not just talking the talk like all these other outlets sitting and bloviating out of their assholes in a studio. Some of them are great, and I love them. But we're going the extra mile, leaving the studio, and we're going on the ground. But we need your help, because we can't print money like the federal government. Our funding comes from you, the people. So please, if you can, $5 a month is all I'm asking. You could support us for as low as 16 cents a day. StatusCoup.com/join. We're going to do our monthly members only call. I don't know. I have a newborn, so I'll have to ask my wife. Probably this week or next week. Which is always fun. We do a kind of like a Zoom call with our members, usually go an hour or two. You don't have to be on camera, but it's our way to kind of talk to the people, take your questions. We also do behind the scenes content that we provide members from our on the ground reporting. As I told yesterday during our live stream, we're also now suing the city of Los Angeles and the LAPD chief for their illegal shooting at journalists. So we're on that lawsuit. So there's a lot going on, and we need your help. So please support us if you can. Think about it. What do you spend 16 cents a day on? What do you spend $5 a week on? If you are one of those people that literally don't have $5 a month to this, that's fine. I don't want to make anyone's situation worse. But if you got $5 a month, we have other plans, $10 a month, $20. We're trying to expand. We need a producer. We need another editor. We need another reporter. I'd like to pay Zaina to do more. But, I'm not individually rich. So please support us now.
Yeah, guys, help to hire me.
There you go. So, Zaina, I want to get to this because it's just like, what is the point? What is the point of having a Democratic Party?
Seems like it's completely feckless right now. There is no point. Where is our opposition party? There is none.
So let's play the Hakeem Jeffries clip because it's shorter. Hakeem Jeffries, who is now the head by all intents and purposes. He's the head of the Democratic Party in the House. He was asked, what do you think about Ro Khanna's War Powers Resolution Act, which Ro Khanna and I believe 19 or 20 others, maybe more than that,
it's
signed
47
on
as of right now. So that 40, it went up this morning, actually.
47 Democrats and I think one Republican, Thomas Massey, signed on to invoking the War Powers Act so that we could actually follow the Constitution and Congress can authorize, the genie's out of the bottle, but any further action against Iran. This was Hakeem Jeffries' response when asked, do you support that?
He's buying himself some time and some room. I was also in the Holy Land very recently. I think progressives underestimate
that's Van
how
Jones.
dangerous
You got the other
Iran
one?
is.
This one's the Van Jones one is pretty terrible too.
Oh, we're gonna get to that. Don't worry. Did I not put that in there? Oh, God damn it. Hold on.
Did I miss it?
No, I think I didn't put it in there. Let me get it for you. We could play the Van Jones one in the meantime, and I'll get the Hakeem Jeffries one.
He's buying himself some time and some room. I was also in the Holy Land very recently. I think progressives underestimate how dangerous Iran is. Iran is not a normal country. Normal countries don't blind women because they showed some hair. They don't empower little gangs and proxies to surround a country and fire rockets and rape people. So Iran, the two things are clear. The what, they cannot have a bomb, and the why, because they say death to America, death to Israel, and death to all the Jews. One of those should offend you if you're progressives. At least one should offend you. And so the question, though, is the who and the how. Is Israel going to take out this nuclear capacity by dropping people there who blow it up? Or is America going to take it out by dropping a bomb that blows it up? But the what and the why are clear, and I think progressives should get on board with that. We cannot have a nuclear-armed Iran. I was in the region. You were in the region. This is a very dangerous power that cannot get a nuclear weapon.
So that's the progressive on CNN.
With Scott Jennings, man, absolutely. That's you're right. Let's go to war with Iran. Let's do this.
So Zaina, I mean, I'm a Jew, so like I agree. I'm not for like death to Israel and death to America and all these things, but by that purpose, shouldn't we be going to war with like Duterte in the Philippines? Shouldn't we be going to war with, I don't know, name your fucking brutal dictator that we're in business with? Shouldn't we have gone to war with Saudi Arabia, who dismembers journalists, who dismembers political opponents, who treats women just as bad? Are we going to go to war with all brutal, oppressive regimes around the world? We seem to only want to go to war with the ones that don't basically allow us to come in, take their natural resources, and look the other way at their brutality. So Van Jones and these idiots on CNN, and it's not just CNN, it's all of them. New York Times, Washington Post, the Associated Press, some of the smaller ones. First of all, they haven't learned from Iraq. They're not asking for incontrovertible evidence. Let me repeat, incontrovertible evidence that Iran has a nuclear program, that they were close. They're just taking it on faith.
And Van Jones is doing propaganda for Israel. He's doing propaganda, direct propaganda for Israel. I mean, he wouldn't have mentioned, I just made a trip to the Holy Land. Oh, you got your talking points, buddy. Yeah, that's what he's doing. That's as simple as it gets.
But putting aside the morality for a second, because morally you should be against this, if any of these Democrats had a brain, do they not see in an off election year, and Zaina, you could explain this better because you've run campaigns, it's very hard to get anybody to do anything on an off election year, particularly 4 or 5 months after a presidential election. Bernie Sanders and AOC, they got like nearly 40,000 people coming out in LA. They got 20,000 in red states, Idaho. Overall, they've had over 100,000 people come out to all these states. It's not just lefties. They got independents in those crowds. They got Republicans in those crowds. You even have like Hill bots. You got Hillary voters in some of those crowds. You got Biden voters. I mean, true. And they're coming out for an anti-capitalist, anti-oligarchy, anti-war message. Maybe the Democratic Party, if they cared about winning, Bernie infamously has said they'd rather go down on the Titanic as long as they remain in first class. Maybe if they cared about winning, they'd say, maybe this Bernie guy, he's no longer a threat to us because he's not going to run again. Maybe he's onto something, and maybe we should try to co-opt or at least tap into that. No such thing. All the polls show, on all sides, including Republicans, are mostly anti-war. A lot of MAGA, I could tell you, because I've covered Trump's campaign on the ground in 2016. I covered it on the ground in 2020. A lot of them like Trump because of his isolationist posture, even though a lot of it was bullshit. So it should be screaming at this, even if they don't believe it. But they're not, because their donors are part of the war machine. They're getting money from Wall Street that is heavily invested in defense contractors and war. They're getting money from fossil fuel industry, invested in war. They're getting money from big tech, Silicon Valley. ChatGPT just got a $200 million contract with the Pentagon. So now we're turning the military into...
Trump just literally, what was it, last Saturday, right before the parade, they swore four executives in as lieutenant colonels. It could take you decades to work in the military to get up to the position of lieutenant colonel. They swore in 4 executives, one from Meta, one from OpenAI, one from Palantir, into the military as military officials, as lieutenant colonels.
I mean, it's just obscene. And he's out there basically licking Trump's boots and cradling his balls for illegally launching not a defensive war against Iran, because Iran has a, oppressive regime. I mean, it's just insane. Imagine if he was as outraged at the fact that Flint still doesn't have clean water 11 years later. Imagine if he was as outraged that people in East Palestine and Western Pennsylvania are getting cancer because we allowed a multi-billion-dollar railroad company to unnecessarily nuke East Palestine and Pennsylvania by detonating 5 cars with over 1 million pounds of cancerous vinyl chloride. Imagine if he was ranting about the lithium battery fire in Central California that we covered that has poisoned a lot of our vegetables and fruits that most of the nation doesn't know about. I mean, I could go down the fucking list of stories we cover that nobody else is covering. They don't seem to want to cover that. Also, since we're talking about the military-industrial complex, Ashley did a video on it earlier. I encourage all of you, watch this video. We posted it before this live stream. She goes in depth. I mean, Lockheed Martin is popping champagne at this point. Palantir is talking about investing in Iran. Let's first play the Hakeem Jeffries clip. We have it now.
Would you support the Rokana War Powers resolution?
I haven't taken a look at it.
Leader Jeffries.
That's it. He
The
hasn't even looked at it.
Hasn't looked at the War Powers Act that nearly has 40 Democrats co-sponsoring it.
That's it. That's all he had to say. That's pathetic.
Now, let's move on to...
Oh, but he has been fomenting war with Iran. Hakeem Jeffries has been openly fomenting war with Iran for the last 6 months.
Well, you know, Zaina, honestly, this is bad on me because we're now almost an hour into this stream and I forgot to mention the elephant in the room. They don't want to piss off their sugar daddies at AIPAC. Hakeem Jeffries purchased by AIPAC. Adam Schiff, the senator from California, purchased by AIPAC. Richie Torres, the congressman, purchased by AIPAC. When you look on the when you look at the smaller scale, all eyes are on New York City tomorrow with the mayoral race. Zoran Mamdani, last minute polls looks like he might have a shot against Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo is purchased by AIPAC, and AIPAC is turning the mayoral race of New York City into like the prime minister of Israel's race. All the ads are about Israel in one of the least affordable cities in the country. It's deja vu to the Cleveland race with Nina Turner running for Congress. What they did to Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Jessica Cisneros. But they don't want to piss off AIPAC. And Thomas Massey went on the Sunday shows yesterday saying, notice how all these Republicans are saying the same exact thing in their tweets. They're getting their talking points from AIPAC. So he's, fax me the War Powers. I haven't taken a look at it. He knows what he knows. He knows what Khan's act is. He doesn't want to piss off AIPAC because they are still living in corporate corrupt la-la land where we need to have the big dollars to compete. We can't piss off the donors, and they're still living in their also self-perseverance that we don't want to piss off the donors because we want to get on their boards when we leave Congress, and we want to get those cushy jobs.
AIPAC was one of the few lobby groups that openly threatened the candidates that I helped to support when I was at Brand New Congress. They would show up at their offices. They would say, if you don't sign on, and they didn't, our candidates took a pledge not to sign on to any federal PACs like that or corporate PACs, and specifically AIPAC because we supported boycott, divest, and sanction as a slate. And they would show up and they would show up and they would show up and they would send letters and they would directly like threaten to primary them and say that we're going to make sure that you lose. We're going to do ballot challenges. So that was the only, I'm not saying that there aren't 1,000 other lobby groups that do pressure candidates, but these were the most persistent and the had some of the harshest rhetoric. And literally I know of multiple candidates that they went out, helped to recruit, and ran specifically against our candidates because our candidates were running on a pro-Palestine, a Palestinian human rights platform.
I want to move on because this kind of gives away the game, doesn't it? Let's play. This is, I think, the chief operating officer of Lockheed Martin. This was before Trump's illegal attack on Iran, but seems like he already knew kind of what was in store. He seems very gleeful on the financial forecast ahead. Let's play that clip.
The COO of Lockheed Martin, Frank St. John, thank you for joining us. Lots to discuss because defense is the topic that is happening right now. And a lot of people are saying defense spending, are we in the beginning stages here, given everything we're seeing, Ukraine, the Middle East, or are we sort of in those middle innings? Where would you say we are?
Hey, Phil, good to see you again. And I would say we are in probably the beginning of a 3 to 5 year surge in defense spending, especially here in Europe. The first couple of years, there was a lot of dialogue and understanding the issue and understanding the demand for deterrence capability. Now we're starting to see those budgets come into play in the European countries, as well as some increases back in the U.S. domestically. So I think for the next 3 to 5 years, budgets are going to be pretty substantial.
Back in the U.S., a lot of people have heard the president talk about the Golden Dome missile defense.
Oh, exciting for him. How exciting. He gets to buy a second yacht, I would assume.
Second, try fifth.
Right,
then you have the psychos at Palantir, which, as you mentioned, Zaina, Trump basically has handed them a fat contract. That's Peter Thiel's company. Peter Thiel is the
Alex Karp, who is psychotic. Yeah.
Peter Thiel is the billionaire responsible for our vice president, getting him elected as senator in the first place, poured in, I believe, $15 million to elect J.D. Vance. He bankrolled J.D. Vance's venture capitalist firms or whatever the hell he was doing when he was pretending to be a hillbilly. That ridiculous hillbilly elegy book, which he, like Trump, pretended to be a populist. He's not. But let's show you the co-founder of Palantir, which is heavy into surveillance capitalism, AI, and is working with the Trump administration to create basically a centralized surveillance database of all Americans.
Point to understand is
they were going to throw flowers at us in Iraq. That never happened.
Yeah, well, and I'm not saying they're going to throw flowers at us here, but this is a lot different situation, and it's you know, I work with a lot of amazing Persian people. I'm really excited to invest in Iran if we can get this country to be some sort of republic, not run by crazy people, and that's a lot easier than doing that in Afghanistan or somewhere else.
Well, so how much do you think this is about? We were talking to the Minister of the Economy in Israel. Is it about regime change, like full-on regime change in Iran, versus just eliminating the nuclear threat?
Well, it's very clear that this administration says it's about eliminating the nuclear threat. That's their goal. I respect that. You know, when we attacked Iraq 20 years ago, even then I thought it was a mistake versus going after Iran. Iran's clearly a really evil regime. So I've been against the Iranian regime. I've been for freeing Iran for a long time. That is not what this administration says they're doing, and I respect that. I think it is critical we get rid of the nukes.
Okay, so from what you...
Great investment.
John Lonsdale, they're literally evil. I mean, they were celebrating, you know, they got the $30 million contract to spy on us here in the United States, to go through our social media, to go through whatever they want to label as T groups. Alex Karp has joked about how he would love to make drones like to dump feces on people and, you know, to silence anyone that disagrees. He's a raging a supporter of Israel's, you know, apartheid, and they funded Lavender in Israel. They helped to fund Lavender, which was the AI program that Israel used to randomly target people and daddy's home that bombed houses when people came back home. That's what they did. They waited till men under 30, they were targeting anyone under 30 that was a male, and when they would come back home, they would bomb the entire apartment building without any consideration of life. These are the a-holes, and they're very excited because they're about to make an insane amount of money. Complete sociopaths, just complete pieces of trash.
I have to run. The realities of having a newborn and a toddler, but Zaina is going to keep it going. Do not go anywhere because we have more. Zaina, I just texted you. We have a clip from another lunatic, John Bolton, to respond to. He was on CNN. We also have a mashup of, I guess, the new president of America, Benjamin Netanyahu, because it seems like he gets to dictate whatever America does, whether it's a Democratic president, Republican president, doesn't matter. We have a mashup of him. We showed it yesterday, but if you didn't see, over 30 years, literally saying Iran is 5 minutes away from a nuke. So that tells you how ironclad this evidence was. We also have some of Trump's tweets or truths. I don't know how to say it. Truths over the last 24 hours, including him ranting about oil prices going up. Guess he didn't think about that one before he launched the war against Iran based on Fox News vibes. Also has him openly talking about regime change. So I'll let Zaina respond to those. But please support us. Again, we are currently planning. We're going to be covering protests on the ground against the Iran war. We're going to stay on the ICE reign of terror. And remember, Trump is an expert manipulator, and he's an excellent boomerang, meaning he creates one chaotic situation to distract you from this. So there will be another chaotic thing that Trump does, probably in a few days, to move you off of this and have you look over here. But the reality is, underneath it all, he's currently pushing one of the most regressive bank robberies in American history to give the top 1% a giant blowjob. The top 1% on average would get nearly a $300,000 tax cut under the big, beautiful bill. Whereas if you make between $17,000 and $50,000, you're going to get a $700 tax increase. What's a great way to distract from that? Let's start a war with Iran. Also cutting Medicaid to the tune of nearly $1 trillion. Secret provisions that ban states from regulating artificial intelligence. What could go wrong? As artificial intelligence is now projected to wipe out entry-level jobs in America. Some AI executives
control us, the population. Yeah.
Some AI executives are forecasting 20 to 30% unemployment because of AI. But hey, it might cure cancer. Okay, but who's going to have the health care in this fucked up system to get the treatment if you don't have a job? Because our health care is tied to jobs. I could go on and on, but please support us because we're not taking our eye off the domestic chaos. We will cover this war, but we want to stay on the ground, and we need your support to do it. StatusCoup.com/join. Take it from here.
Thanks, Jordan. Have fun with the babe.
I will.
So I want to talk about, we're going to show the video of John Bolton. But first, before you hear John Bolton speak, MAGA is in a complete frenzy. There is a break within MAGA, with people falling within the Trump supporter base, with people falling on the side of Thomas Massie and the Wartime Resolutions Act, and leaning into the fact that they believe that Trump ran on, like we said, many of us knew he wasn't anti-war, but there were a portion of his base that did believe he was anti-war, that he wasn't going to get us in any more foreign altercations, that he wasn't going to do any U.S. expansionism, especially the nationalists that supported him. There is a rift in the base of Trump supporters, especially the populist base, that are slightly different than the diehards, and we're seeing fallout from that. Do you have the tweet, Colin, of Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet about Trump? Yeah, so she goes into here to kind of describe what she is feeling about going into this war, especially as a mother. And, you know, there's like a gazillion things I disagree with her on. I think that she has extremely fascistic views when it comes to immigration. She supports austerity. She's not really for the working person. But it is interesting because I do think that it signifies the fracture that's happening within the Trump base, where people are kind of fleeing and turning away from Trump on this issue, breaking from the Trump administration. She says, I spent millions of my own money and traveled the entire country campaigning for President Trump and his MAGA agenda and his promises. And Trump's MAGA agenda included these key promises: no more foreign wars, no more regime change, world peace. And this is what the people voted for. Only 6 months in, and we're back into foreign wars, regime change, and World War III. It feels like a complete bait and switch to please the neocons, warmongers, military-industrial complex contractors, and neocon TV personalities. Ironically, we just a few minutes ago went over him watching Fox News and being like, "Oh, what are we feeling here? How is this playing on the media stage?" But anyway, she says to appease the neocon TV personalities that MAGA hates and who were never Trumpers. After the bombs were dropped, we were told complete success in Iran's nuclear capabilities were totally wiped out. Then it quickly turned to Iran's nuclear facilities particularly damaged, and now it's we don't know where their enrichment uranium is. Let me be very clear. My children are 22, 25, and 27. I will literally fight anyone for their future. Their future and their entire generation's future must be free of America's last foreign wars that provoked terrorist attacks on our homeland, military drafts, and nuclear war. I'm fighting for them to have a future where they can afford to buy a home, affordable insurance, invest in retirement. Is she really, though? But anyway, invest in retirement, enjoy life, retain their God-given freedoms, afford to raise a family under the Christian faith, not be in debt, safety and security, and not have our own taxpayer-funded government destroy it all. Contrary to brainwashed Democrat boomers think and protest about, Trump is not a king, MAGA is not a cult, and I can do and have my own opinion. So we are seeing a rift. We're seeing, a lot of cope from people like Charlie Kirk and others about this. And I think that the base is going to continue to fracture. Now, whether or not anyone responds, we'll see. But the Democrats do have an opportunity to come in and not be feckless, feckless on this issue and just march in line like Van Jones and Hakeem Jeffries and actually stand up and, all this time fomenting. We're trying to attract the never Trumpers. We're trying to attract, the other side of the aisle. Well, right now they have an opportunity to do that. And instead, they're allowing AIPAC to lead them by the leash instead of standing up against what is happening in Trump's decisions. We did want to talk about, we are now making national announcements via True Social and social media. That's how things are going. The White House memes constantly. We are in the stage of idiocracy, and Trump's latest tweets are not only juvenile, embarrassing, but dangerous. Russia, the president of Russia has now claimed that, it's floating back and forth whether or not they're considering giving Iran nuclear weapons. It's been a back and forth where some ambassadors from Russia and others in Iran is claiming that there may be negotiations on the table, while members of the Russian government are claiming, no, we're not headed there. But let's take a look at what Donald Trump has to say. If you could pull up the Donald is angry at Russia for using the N-word tweet, Colin. This is absolutely crazy. I did hear from President Medvedev from Russia casually throwing around the N-word, nuclear, and saying that he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran. Did he really say that? Or is it just a figment of my imagination? If he did say that, and if confirmed, please let me know immediately. The N-word should not be treated so casually. I guess that's why Putin's the boss. By the way, if anyone thinks our hardware was great over the weekend, far and away the strongest and best equipment we have, 20 years advanced over the pack, is our nuclear submarines. They are more powerful and lethal weapons ever, the most powerful and lethal weapons ever built, and just launched 30 Tomahawks. All 30 hit their mark perfectly. So in addition to our great fighting pilots, thank you to captain and crew. So he's basically threatening back to Putin with this extraordinarily immature tweet about whether or not Russia is going to arm Iran and balance the scale, so to say, on this. And it's more of what we talked about in the article earlier from New York Times that exposed that the Trump administration is basically out of touch and just looking for what is popular and trying to stoke treating it like theater. Like, this is reality TV, but it's reality TV with our lives. And the others around him, like Jordan mentioned earlier, this is a perfect distraction. This is a distraction from our economic crisis. This is a distraction from the massive cuts Doge did to our infrastructure for Medicare, Medicaid, housing, all this funding being gutted for social service programs, while at the same time, I know Ashley and I have both covered the gutting of any kind of oversight, corporate oversight, to protect us with a little bit of protections that the EPA, the EEOC, OSHA, and others have provided, which were already lacking, now being cut back. The NIH being gutted. The world us breaking off our partnership with the World Health Organization. So it's stacking up. And this is a great distraction of wartime theater, kabuki theater, in order to distract us from the problem at hand, while also at the same time appeasing Israel. And we did get a response from Medvedev on Trump's tweet. If we could pull that up really quick, Colin. And what Medvedev has stated is that, regarding his concerns, he said, I condemned the U.S. strike on Iran. It failed to achieve its objectives. And I'll interject here and say that there are reports that Iran had moved most of their uranium prior to the strikes. However, Russia has no intention of supplying nuclear weapons to Iran because, unlike Israel, we are parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I know quite well what this would entail, having overseen our nuclear forces as president, but other countries might, and that's what was said. We definitely shouldn't be arguing over who has more nukes, all the more so because the New START Treaty, which I once signed with the U.S. president, is still in force for now. The question is, what comes next? So he's referring to the latest nuclear proliferation agreement with Russia is still in effect. So he's essentially saying, no, we're not sending nuclear warheads to Iran. So it kind of begs the question, is Donald Trump stoking this in order to stoke up even more tensions between Russia and the United States? But all of this has a impact on the economy. It's going to have an impact on oil prices. It's going to have an impact on on our pocketbooks. We're looking at the latest reports that I saw from the Associated Press is that estimates are upwards to $180 to $230 a barrel, which means that our prices on the receiving end could potentially go up a half to a third, and even potentially double by the end of this, which could be catastrophic for everything from our logistics to us just putting gas in our car so that we can get to freaking work. Senator Markey had tweeted about the surging oil prices. If you could pull that up for me, Colin. And he is talking about, the port at the Strait of Hormuz, which we were talking about earlier. Trump had tweeted, everyone keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemy. Don't do it. Just like basically keep oil prices down no matter what happens, which is extraordinarily unrealistic and isn't going to happen. Oil prices are going to go up no matter, his all caps boomer tweet isn't going to help that. It's going to happen. And he knows it's going to happen. Ed Markey tweeted in all caps as well, which is really funny. He tweeted, don't blame me for surging oil prices when I destabilize the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz. Essentially, Ed Markey is saying Trump is tweeting this out as a virtue signal to say, oh, not my fault. I didn't destabilize anything. It's not my fault. I told them to keep oil prices down. Bro, they just didn't listen to me. That's what's happening. That's the level of idiocracy that we are at. Just complete idiocracy. Just don't do it. All caps. Internet trolling to all Middle Eastern powers that sell oil. So that's where we're at. We're at a place where we are looking at war that could potentially impact our people. But then there's also the human element and the dehumanization of the people in Iran and the people that Israel have been encroaching on. I mean, they're currently at hostilities and have done multiple what they label as preemptive strikes. So strikes before them being struck. They've done them in Beirut, Lebanon. They've done them in Yemen, Syria, Iran. So Israel is constantly attacking the countries that are around its border while also continuing to carry out their mass slaughter in Gaza, where reports of dozens to hundreds are dying every single day at the hands of the Israeli onslaught. So it was a really great coverage this weekend by Ashley Bishop and Jean Farina on the ground covering the hands off Iran, no war with Iran protest. And we had one video from Ashley that really hit home to me as an Iranian American, as someone who has family in the Fars area in Iran, and worrying about and watching from abroad as the United States is ramping up the dehumanization. One of the things before you watch this clip that I want everyone watching to think about is how disconnected we are in the West from what the US does globally, how protected we are, what that feels like to be within these borders. I don't mean protected because our government, of course, is responsible for tremendous abuses. I mean, we have jackboots on the ground, kidnapping people, ICE agents wearing civilian clothes and grabbing people off the street. So I'm not saying that the US is a paradise. What I'm trying to say is that we are disconnected from what is happening. And then the fact that these are human beings in Tehran. More than 500 people have died recently in the last report. And civilian infrastructure has absolutely been hit. And of course, some Israeli civilian infrastructure has been hit as well. There was a hospital that was damaged in Israel. And everyone was tweeting out yesterday from the Israeli side that, this is a war crime. However, 30 hospitals have been leveled or destroyed in Gaza. 30 hospitals. So I'm not condoning any hospital strike, period. But I am speaking of the hypocrisy. So when we talk about humanization, I just want you to hear this interview with someone who is in the United States and her parents are still in Iran.
Please don't bomb my parents. So can you explain your sign?
My parents are in Iran right now. They were living in Tehran when the bombing started, and I managed to convince them to leave Tehran 2 nights ago. Now they're in the north. They've evacuated, but I watched them on Find My iPhone, tracking their car to make sure that they weren't bombed on the way. I was tracking overnight. I would wake up every hour. Me and my sister, who's in England, would take shifts. I still have so many friends in Tehran. I still have so many of my friends still have parents, have old grandparents that are in Tehran and can't evacuate. I still can't believe that this is actually happening. Anybody who thinks that the Iraq war was a mistake should be here. And everybody who was at the anti-Trump protests should be here. If they don't support war, they should be here.
If they don't support war, they should be here. And this is one of the aspects that, I've watched CNN panels. I've been watching MSNBC. I watch mainstream media, so that I can stay informed, in part for my work in Status Coup and just as a journalist and an activist in general. However, I am not seeing very much reporting on the actual human toll of these useless proxy wars that are all about bricks, are all about maintaining Western hegemony of the Western dollar, are all about power for the few elites, while the rest of us are in these situations where, you know, right now Iranians are trying to flee. They gave them 24 hours in their second onslaught attack from Israel before we attacked the nuclear sites. They gave them 24 hours to flee out of Tehran before the United States and Israel announced that they had overtaken the skies over Iran and over Tehran. So people were trying to get out. It created a bottleneck. People couldn't get out. There was mass displacement. Millions of people live in Tehran. It's a huge industrialized city. And the traffic was blocked up for miles and miles and miles. It was so backed up that hundreds of thousands of people were also starting off on foot to try to flee. And these are the kinds of impacts that aren't covered. And I'm so grateful that Ashley was able, and John Farina was on the ground having interviews with people that are literally impacted, whose families are impacted by this, because that is something that is often forgotten. So I commend her for being on the ground and covering these protests, because God knows no mainstream media is out there covering the protests, just like they didn't in the anti-Iraq war protests, just like we hardly saw any coverage of DePaul when it came to national media coverage, just like we didn't see any coverage of the Stop Cop City protest on a national level, really. So I'm glad she was on the ground. Please help to support us if you can. It's $5 a day. I mean, it's $5 a month. You can go to StatusCoup /join to donate, but please help us keep people on the ground, because it's so important to be able to tell those real world stories. And watching afar from thousands of miles away is a certain kind of gut punch that I can't even explain. It's terrifying, and it's terrifying knowing that as a U.S. citizen, and it's infuriating knowing as a U.S. citizen that this is what our federal dollars is going to, is to mass destabilization, regardless of how I feel about the IRCG being and the Iranian regime being in their human rights violations. Those are two separate discussions when we're talking about what's happening there. So, speaking of this, and speaking of manufacturing consent over the years, and this is something Noam Chomsky, the writer, has talked about. He did a whole book called Manufacturing Consent, and this is what we saw with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The weapons of mass destruction lie is that we are going to be flooded, overwhelmed with propaganda about Iran's nuclear program. And I wanted to show you a video that will show you a video from Benjamin Netanyahu, where he has been talking about how Iran is going to have nukes within just a few weeks, since he's been saying this since the 80s. He's spoken in front of Congress and the UN on this multiple times, and let's just take a listen. Because it's asinine.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5
Yeah, and the clip from 1996 was Benjamin Netanyahu talking in front of Congress in 1996 about how Iran is just a frog's hair away from having nuclear weapons 30 years ago. So that's what we're looking at. The Daily Show did a great job compiling those, but there are literally hundreds of more clips exactly like that. Every time he's come on the media, every time you've heard him speak in the United States, this is something he always mentions. He mentioned it in his address to Congress, where he got a standing ovation last year from nearly every member of Congress. So yeah, this dude has been fomenting this. The members of the Likud party have been fomenting this in Israel for 30 years now. And it's in fact in order to destabilize Iran so that they have no pushback into their encroachment and their project for greater Israel, which is expansionism into Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, surrounding countries. So that's what we're looking at, and we're playing their game. Trump is playing right into their hands because he was so hungry to get, his hands dirty in this so that he could look like a big bad, I don't know. It's a twisted situation. And you have it is as disjoint and as illogical as this situation is, and as it's so clear to so many Americans that it is for profits of the military industrial complex, that this is a distraction from the economic crisis we are facing here. You have people like John Bolton going on CNN. Also, since we're talking about manufacturing consent, let's take a listen to what John Bolton had to say. Do you happen to have that clip, Colin?
Give me 1 second. See where I put it.
Oh, sure. Take your time. But as you listen to these news reports, think about what they're saying and think about how disjointed it is, and then draw parallels to that, to what happened in Iraq, because we have seen these patterns over and over and over again. So many times. And it's exactly the same thing that, Van Jones is now doing with progressives need to get on board with this. You're underestimating how dangerous Iran is. They're claiming now that, soldiers don't even have to get hurt, which God hope not. But that, all this warfare can be fought through technology.
Were you surprised that President Trump took such decisive action?
Well, let me say this unequivocally. I think President Trump made the right decision for America to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I think we're on the verge of potentially seeing regime change in Iran as part of that. I think this is a huge change in the Middle East. It was a decisive action. It was the right thing to do. I thought somebody should do it for a long time, but better late than never.
Okay, I want to be clear. There is no evidence that it was definitely a nuclear weapons program. He is not acknowledging that Trump basically tore up and threw out the proliferation program and the agreement that we had with Iran established by Obama. And like Jordan said, there's 1,000 things that I have that are criticisms of Obama, but this was actually a good plan to lighten the sanctions on Iran while we had an agreement. And what inspectors were showing at the time is that, yes, Iran was complying with this agreement. So Trump then tears up this agreement. Biden comes into office. He fails to, negotiate a new agreement. And then Trump comes back in and and throws a wrench in our latest negotiations and follows step with Israel in their quote unquote preemptive strike that had no real foundational basis, because even if Iran was to get one nuclear bomb, what are they going to do? Blow up one country and then have the onslaught of the entire world? It's a ridiculous assertion. It's fear-mongering. It's fear-mongering to manufacture consent for a war so that the people like the guy from Palantir, like the folks like Alex Karp and Peter Thiel and who we mentioned before, can just get rich make a ton of money. And that's what we're looking at. And we're looking at a feckless response from the Democratic Party right now regarding this. Only 47 have signed on to Thomas Massey's Wartime Powers Act. And this Wartime Powers Act doesn't even mean that they don't necessarily support the war, even though Thomas Massey is clear that he doesn't support it. It's saying, give us the authority so that Congress can then decide for us to go to war, so that it would be constitutional. Yeah, that's great. It would be much better if it was constitutional. I agree, but it would still be war if it was approved by Congress. So I would say most listening also likely don't agree with Congress approving us to go to war with Iran. And then the last thing that we have to show you was a tweet from Chris Murphy, Democrat Chris Murphy, on this issue. And we've heard a lot of crickets. So Chris Murphy is one of the ones who is actually, speaking out about this, other than the Squad, other than Bernie, other than Ed Markey and a few others. A lot of the Democrats have fallen conveniently silent, or like Chuck Schumer and others are supporting war with Iran. So I don't know if you have that tweet or not, Colin, from Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy says, I was briefed on the intelligence last week. Iran posed no imminent threat of attack to the United States. Iran was not close to building a deliverable nuclear weapon. The negotiations Israel scuttled with their strikes held the potential for success. And that's accurate. There were talks going on between the United States and Iran, as well as many European nations. BRICS was involved. A lot of the BRICS countries, which are a financial conglomerate of countries that are trying to strengthen their own currency so that they don't have to be as reliant on the US dollar. And BRICS includes Brazil, India, Pakistan, the UAE, Russia, and China, as well as a handful of other countries. Iran recently signed on to BRICS about a year ago, I would say, and the negotiations with BRICS happened around that time. So as soon as Iran started joining BRICS, a lot of the heat started dialing up in the Middle East. So much heat started dialing up because of the United States trying to maintain hegemony of the US dollar. And so it's bankers playing with our lives, basically, to maintain dominance of the US dollar is part of the equation of what's happening here. But Chris Murphy was very clear, and he is correct. He was briefed on the intelligence last week. So he went to an intelligence briefing. That briefing told him that same thing Tulsi Gabbard said, that there was no imminent threat of attacks to the United States. That Iran was not even close to building a deliverable nuclear weapon. There was no reason for Israel to do their strike other than to force the United States into backing them in order to distract from the horrific atrocities that they're doing in Gaza, their onslaught in the West Bank, and their attacks of the surrounding 6 countries that they have been attacking continuously in quote unquote preemptive strikes. And preemptive means we're striking you. We're going to hit you before you hit us. And Iran has every right under international law, if aggressed upon, to respond to defend themselves and their people internationally under international law. So that's where we're at. We're at the place where Israel struck Iran. It crushed the deal that was happening at the time. And now we're basically gaslighting the United States, members of Congress, and the Trump administration are gaslighting the entire world and all of us as Americans and saying, no, that there was an imminent threat. And currently there are many talking heads, Charlie Kirk and others from sort of the right-wing sphere, Laura Loomer, are talking about sleeper cells within the United States. You have to be wary of the sleeper cells of Iranians that are just, I don't know, going to do terrorism within our borders. And that's why we have to now have regime change in Iran, because that's somehow going to prevent that, even if that was true, and it's not. So, where we're at is a dark place, and it is distracting from our economic crisis that we are facing now. Anytime that our country has been on the verge of a major economic crisis or within a major economic crisis, from the Korean War to the Vietnam War to the war in Iraq, it is because of what is happening on the ground domestically with the millionaires or the billionaires and the major corporations and the conglomerates stealing money, so much money from the American people that it has destabilized our economy. And that's where we're at right now. Our economy is destabilized. We are in crisis economically. AI is threatening our jobs. War is a great distraction, and it's a great moneymaker. And that's one of the foundational reasons that this is happening. And you should be mad. You should be angry. You should be speaking up, and you should be pissed the fuck off, and pissed off that the Democrats are not responding and are being feckless losers right now. Do we have any super chats, Colin? Elizabeth became a member. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And be on the lookout for our membership bonuses, just like our members only call that we have at least once a month. So take a look out. Those conversations are so much fun, and I know that we have a lot of regulars that join those. Bone Loads, 1 membership. Thank you so much, Bone Loads, and thanks to whoever, thanks for gifting. That's awesome. It's always good to pay it forward to someone else. Sally S. became a member. Thank you so much for joining, Sally. Welcome to the community.
And that's all of them.
All right. I guess that that's all we had to cover today. We wanted to come, and I do want to just update on the latest that we have heard about on the ground at the military base that Iran had attempted to attack. And as we had mentioned earlier, Iranian leaders had made it clear that this was a deterrent, a attack that was designed to be a deterrent. Qatari officials were given warnings before the attack. And the attack is to say, let's stop this pressure valve, let's roll it back, and let's come back to the negotiating table. And currently at the there are no casualties and no damage reported at the military base itself. So at the Oh, yes, it was Al Udeid. That's right. It was the Al Udeid military base. There has been no damage. However, Israel has responded, and Israel has sent an onslaught of attacks on Tehran within the last half an hour to an hour. So reports of that are still coming out. I have not seen any reports on the exact damage that was done from this latest strike from Israel into Tehran, but we'll be sure to, keep you updated in coming days as we continue to cover this back and forth. But this was aimed to be a deterrent, and now it appears as though Israel has struck Tehran again, claiming that they are striking the infrastructure of the Iranian leadership in order to push for regime change. And I will remind everyone, when pushing for regime change by destroying a country's infrastructure, setting their oil fields on fire, so defanging their ability for the people to even have assets for themselves to rebuild, destroying their largest city, that they're destabilizing it. And this is how we have had actual terrorist groups form, such as ISIS and others, is because of the destabilization that the United States regime change in the wake of that. You don't just throw people into utter chaos and then say, okay, now put it back together, you're screwed. And that's essentially what we're doing. Yeah. So thank you so much for everyone who joined today. And if you would like to become a member, please go to StatusCoup /join. Help to pay Colin, help to pay Ashley Bishop, John Farina, who are doing amazing work. Tina Desiree Berg has been on the ground in Los Angeles. She's gotten some of the best footage coming out of there. Her dedication is amazing. They don't call her titanium for no reason. She runs toward the danger and not away from it in these situations. She's amazing. So if you can, please help to support Status Coup News as we do more on the ground journalism. We are looking to go to Memphis, where potentially go to Memphis, where Elon Musk has now built a huge AI data center that is poisoning the people around it. And the mainstream media is mainly ignoring this story. So we are wanting to go down there to help put the mic in front of the people there to see what is happening on the ground. If you can, please support us. And you can find me at bullhornbulletin.com or Zainab Day on YouTube or Zainab Day on TikTok. I'm going to start doing some lives on there pretty soon. So if you can, please follow me. I have a series coming up called Politicult, where I cover cultism in politics and how it relates to legislation that is coming out in real time. I also have another series called The Broligarchy that I am doing in conjunction with Punch Up Pod that is covering the folks like Peter Thiel and Palantir and these weirdos that are trying to basically take over every facet of our daily lives. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope that everyone has an amazing day.